Those who have weird neighbors. What does your neighbor do that is weird or creepy? Story 1. My neighbor secretly does my yard work. He's a very reserved man in his 50s, and my fiance and I are in our mid-late 20s. Our neighbor never talks to us and will frantically avoid conversation with other people. He blows the leaves in his yard every single day, even during summer. He also waxes his car once a week. If there's a storm, the next day walk around his yard picking up twigs that have broken off of trees until his yard is perfectly clear of twigs. I should mention we live in a forest, and both of our yards are at least an acre or so, with dozens of trees. The yard obsession doesn't end with his property line, though. At least once a month, he'll come home, and our yard is magically groomed. The leaves have been blown, even if we just blew the leaves a few days prior. Our gravel driveway has been sprayed for weeds. Our tiny section of grass has been mowed, etc. We take care of our yard. I have flower beds I maintain, and we do a big yard maintenance day once a month. But it doesn't come close to our neighbor's yard maintenance. I've even caught him in our yard a couple of times, and he just hustles out without saying a word. We have a picket fence around our acre lot, so it makes him silently leaving our yard just a little awkward since he has to walk all the way up to the gate. I've tried to thank him multiple times, but the last time I brought him cookies as a thank you for blowing our leaves, he would only open the door a crack, took the cookie tin, dumped the cookies into his hand, handed me back the tin, and quickly shut the door. Now, I just leave thank you card in his mailbox. I'm guessing he's either bored, has an obsession with yard maintenance, or is just trying to be nice to the young couple next door, but really hates social interaction. My parents have a neighbor that is obsessed with my mom. It was innocent enough at first. He was just nice, and they'd have small conversations. They became friendly, and we would invite him over for BBQs and everything. Then he started to get creepy. Every single time my mom would take the dog out, he would appear outside and want to talk to her. He would find an excuse to come knock on our door every single day. He got the same haircut and grew the same goatee as my dad and started to dress like my dad. He then went and bought the exact same type of motorcycle as my dad. He started showing up at my mom's work, bringing her lunch and flowers. That's when my dad had to confront him, and it almost became physical. He has mostly stayed away since then. Story 2. I have a neighbor in my apartment block who sings opera, not poorly singing over a recording, but singing well on his own. I live next to a school known for its music program, and he's clearly an upper-level opera student. It's never loud enough or late enough to bother me, and he's quite good at it. A few times he's had a woman over, and they've practiced together. He's my weirdest neighbor, but also one of my favorites. Story 3. My neighbors sometimes bang on the wall in the middle of the night. Luckily, it doesn't tend to bother me too much, because I'm generally still awake playing the drums. Story 4. They videotape us 247. Whenever we come home, they stand on their front porch and watch us. They put a big wire fence up between our houses a few years ago. If we're backing out of the driveway, they come and watch to make sure nobody hits the fence. Also, their entire house is covered in plants. I can't see in any of the windows. It's very weird. If it's snowing and we accidentally shovel a tiny bit of snow through the wire fence, they will come out and shovel all their snow onto our side. They will cut down trees on our property that are too close to them and throw all the branches in our driveway, too. Also have paintballed our house. All because we didn't lend them money a few years ago. Story 5. We build a fence on our property line, a few feet into ours actually, and the night it was finished I hear banging outside. I go to the sunroom we have downstairs and see a headlamp moving back and forth quickly. I go outside and see my neighbor throwing lead pipes into our fence screaming, "Can you see me now?" and kept repeating that over and over again. Soon after he spots me and runs back inside. Story 6. My neighbors are obsessive about their yard and are constantly picking up sticks, raking, etc. One day, we have a big snowstorm that drops over a foot of snow. I'm looking out the window at the scenery and see my neighbor walk out his door, trudge about 20 feet into a yard, stick his hand into untouched snow, and pick up a stick. It was like he had infrared vision for the stick. The snow was so deep that it was all level. You couldn't make out any features below. To this day, I don't know how he knew exactly where that stick was. Edit, I have more stories if you want them. Edit 2, the mysterious pile of sticks that grows. Story 7. My neighbors are foreign national from China, and I don't think they quite understand the concept of a barbecue. I was tanning on my balcony one afternoon when my neighbors burst out onto their patio quite loudly and break out a great big grocery bag full of meat. Whole Foods bag by the look of it. So one can imagine the meat wasn't cheap. Dude turns up the heat and throws about 7 to 8 steaks on the grill, straight. No seasoning, no nothing, puts the cover back on, then walks back inside about 5 minutes, and the meat smell is wafting my way. I'm not complaining because it smells pretty good. 20 minutes later, and I am getting worried because it is well overdue for this guy to flip the steaks. Nothing. Another 20 minutes. Those steaks are definitely suffering by now. The meat smell is still there, but it started to smell a bit charred. Nothing. Another hour and a half goes by, and these steaks are definitely charcoal by now. The smell of meat has gone, and it has been replaced by the smell of charcoal and propane. I'm guessing the tank has run out because I have the same Weber grill, and it only fits one tank inside. I hear the guy's Porsche Macung pulled back into his garage, and the whole family bursts out with leftover bags from Sam Woo's. Guy goes back to the grill, opens it up to witness a bunch of bricks of inedible hunks of charcoal, takes some selfies, and pulls them off and throws them on the grass. What the actual? Story 8, across the street, neighbor feeds the stray cats outside. After he empties the food on their plate, he runs his fingers inside of the can and licks the remaining cat food off his fingers. Story 9, the people who live next to me like to invite all the other neighbors over for barbecue, and whatnot. When I first moved in, it was the only time they had come over to invite me. I'm not super sociable, so I politely declined. Once I'm home, I enjoy my solitude. Probably my own fault, though, for choosing an apartment complex that tries to promote community. Apparently, the fact I wasn't in the mood to socialize must have deeply offended them, considering they spread a rumor around the neighborhood that I'm a drug-addicted ex-convict. That's not what's creepy, though. What's creepy is how every time I take my dog for a walk, my neighbors will come outside and just glare at me with crossed arms. It's the consistency with how they do it, too. It could be 3 a.m., and here comes the husband in his underwear to give me dirty looks. Story 10, not at all creepy. Just where my neighbor landscapes my yard. We have like 90-square-foot townhouse yards, and I guess he can't get enough yard work out of his. So far, he's installed some stone paths, put in a retaining wall in the front, and now he's planting stuff in the walled area. I hate yard work so much, I pay a service to keep my micro-yardlet up to city code. So I've told him whatever he wants to do is fine. Still super weird to come home from work and find a new feature in front of my house. Story 11, my sister bro-in-law hated their neighbor. He was a weird pedo type. They had some contractors build a fence in their backyard. He came out into his backyard mid-build and injected one of the guys building the fence in the butt cheek with what he called vitamins. We flipped, he ran away. When they cleared out his house, they found a shitload of child, like Polaroids. It was very bad. Story 12, I have these neighbors that live way behind me, down a long and secluded driveway. They aren't really weird per se, but a nice country, elderly couple in their late 80s, early 90s, save for one odd habit of his. He kills buzzards and wires their decomposing bodies to his fence. I discovered this when I took my toddler son back there to trick or treat his first time. We're walking down that long driveway of theirs, and hey, looky there, big dead buzzards, wings outstretched to the fullest, decomposing on the fence. I was just like, well, that's not something you see every day, and went right onto their door, dearly wanting to ask about them. I couldn't be like trick or treat. What's up with the buzzards? Story 13, so I had a neighbor 80 years old or more widowed guy. Every time I get the newspaper delivered to my mailbox, when I open it I find the crosswords done. I don't do them or give a day. I decided to try catch who's doing my crosswords. Day 1, 8 a.m. They were already done. Day 2, 7:30 a.m. already done. Day 3, 7 a.m. I decided to give up. One day, 4 a.m., I was getting back home from a night out. While I was passing by the mailbox, nothing yet delivered. So I placed my GoPro inside and went sleeping. The next day, finally got it. It was my neighbor. He has done the crosswords right up on my mailbox. For like 10 minutes, I'll try to find the video, but it was absolutely cute, staring at my door time to time and scratching his head. Next day, I took him a 1,000 crosswords book, dropped it right at his door, rang the bell, and stayed on my car discreetly. He took some time to open the door, then found it. I swear it was the happiest person, like a kid that got a puppy. He stayed in his porch and passed like 2 hours doing crosswords, then fell to sleep. Oh. The next day, I was getting back home from work. He came to apologize like a kid that has to confess something and brought some cookies. We stayed talking about his WW2 service and how the world changed. I frequently bought him crossword books until he passed away 1 year ago. May he rest in peace. Edit. I just received a gold Reddit. I don't know what exactly it does, but thank you very much for whom is behind that. Story 14, not so much creepy, just weird. I've lived in my current place for a few years now. My upstairs neighbors moved in about 2 years ago, and they're interesting people. When they first moved in, they would have really loud their bedrooms right above mine. I wasn't bothered by this because it's an apartment, you get used to that, and B, they did it in the evening, so it wasn't like they were waking anyone up. I always left it alone. One night a few months into their first year, I was trawling around on the top floor outside because the gutter was clogged and the apartment maintenance team is slow as, so I was unclogging it myself with a yardstick. My upstairs neighbor came out onto the deck, and I nearly scared the out of him, but I told him I was just the downstairs neighbor, and he relaxed. We got to talking, and then he suddenly got nervous and said, "Hey, me and my girl, we aren't disturbing you," or we all laughed and said, "No, I get it, I have a boyfriend too." He said, "Okay, but we'll still try to keep it down," and he went back inside. Ever since then, they played loud music every time they have to try and cover it up. It's kind of adorable. They had music playing for 6 hours over the weekend one day, and I gave my neighbor a grin and a thumbs up the next day when I ran into him. Story 15, not my neighbor, but a friend's. Lady used to put her car in neutral and push it down the driveway because she said it saved her on gas. Same lady would also get on her hands and knees and trim her yard with scissors after the lawn care company was done. Story 16, oh, I just remembered, I also have a neighbor that collects PT Cruisers. He's got at least 6 of them and washes them all the time. Seems like a weird car to collect. They aren't vintage or anything. And it's funny that everyone thinks this neighbor is weirder than the one who leaves gaping holes in his house. Story 17, I've caught my neighbor probably like 5 to 6 times just staring at me through the window with complete focus. Edit, thank you all for making this the peak of my existence. Story 18, my neighbors have a tent in their backyard. The tent is listed on Airbnb, Edit, Wisconsin. It's sadly gone now, and I can't find a photo. I would post it and ask any stalkers use the side door if they come to murder me. But if I find it, I'll post it. It's near winter here, so it must not have been an all-season Coleman tent. Story 19, we're pretty sure that the lady who lives across from us is a high-end prostitute. We're in a good neighborhood, but she has a wide variety of older men visit her at all hours of day. She's the only person on the block who doesn't come to our block parties or socialize. But once she asked my neighbor to mow her lawn and, upon completion, decided not to pay him because the work wasn't of a good enough quality. It was actually decent, and he was 12 years old. For heaven's sake, we now refer to her as that lady, and everybody knows who we're talking about. Story 20, my next-door neighbors keep using our stuff. They've been caught with their hose attached to our water, taking our outdoor chairs, etc. They also have no problem honking their car horn repeatedly at any time of day or night when someone isn't getting out of the house fast enough. Edit, to everyone telling me to cut their hose. We removed the spigot handle instead a while back. They haven't hooked back in since. Story 21, there's a senile old lady in the apartment behind me. Every time I take my dogs out, she gives me dirty looks. When she sees my girlfriend, she smiles and talks to her, introduces herself every time as if they've never met. Then I walk outside and she scowls. This morning I took my dogs out. Her blinds were open and she was looking out the window. I saw her and smiled. She shut the blinds, never smiling. I've given up on saying good morning, smiling, etc. Story 22, my parents' high-use growing up, he was a horrific gossip and would literally run outside when he saw you to talk about so and so. Anyways, one time I up and needed some plan B. I go to the store, and he's there. I notice him following me aisle to aisle, so I double back him, grab the birth control, and split for the checkout. I was in the clear until the cashier couldn't open the box and yells to her boss, I need help opening this plan B. Of course, he showed up. So the next day, I have a pit in my stomach because I knew he was going to tell the neighborhood. I passed these 2 older ladies who mentioned the plan B I took once they assumed I was out of earshot. One said not to tell my mom. It was my business, and she understood how rough that must have been. The other commented the neighbor had no business sticking his nose in a teenager's life, and she was going to talk to him. My mom never found out. Story 23, I had a neighbor, alcoholic, who thought there were 2 women living in my house. I had dyed my hair blonde from brunette. He continually asked where the brunette was and how she was doing. I finally just said she was fine. Story 24, we had some that pretended to be upstanding religious people. Well, son was a big-time drug dealer. Dad lost his security clearance because of it, and the mother was a raging. Would hear her screaming in the front yard on Sunday mornings, get your Bibles, and get in the car. We're going to be late. Am not sitting in the back of the God church. On and on. They also let their dogs in the front yard instead of the backyard like normal people. The mother came to our door once and screamed at my mother about my sister being and coming in all hours of the night. Well, she worked in a bar and she had the drug-dealing son. She kept trying to push the door open, so my sister called the cops. That was the start to the dad losing his security clearance. He should have divorced her because he wasn't a terrible guy. Story 25, do housemates count? If so, drinks a 2-liter bottle of cola every day, buys it from the corner shop, so it costs double as well, stole female housemates' leather trousers and wanked all over them, pretended to fall outside an Albanian car wash garage in order to get compensation from them, is now in great fear of Albanians. Had another guy stay for about a month, heard him say about 3 words whilst there, like you say hi, and he just walks past, quite antisocial in that regard. Although he never caused a problem, it was just odd. Story 26 in my old house. We had a neighbor who was bad. His name was Ed, and he lived on a hill right above from us. He would always invite me over when I was a little kid to play with his chickens and rabbits. But my grandmother always said no. I never understood why. Ed built a shed with 1 window, only facing our house. This is weird because there's no view on the side my house is on. The view would have been to the left. There was no logical reason for him to face the only window towards our house. Ed also didn't work with tools, so we could never pinpoint what the shed was for, as they had a basement in their house where they stored stuff. My grandpa built a literal 20-foot fence on the side of our house that faces house. I didn't know why it was so tall, and it was a common joke among my friends when we were younger. One day, me and my grandmother were in the pool, and my grandpa caught Ed peeping through a hole in the fence. He would also walk by the yard when my grandma was mowing and tell her he enjoyed watching her mow in her shorts. When I got to high school, he would stand at the top of our yard, wait for me to come home when no one else was there, and come on the porch when I was trying to unlock the door, making random conversation, and always asking me if he could come in. When I was a freshman in college, my grandpa found a stepping stool underneath my closet window. Like someone had been trying to peep in. His initials were painted on the underneath. Ed and his wife has a daughter who was pregnant with twins. Unfortunately, she ended up miscarrying them both later in the pregnancy. They had a funeral for them, and my grandmother was asked by Ed's wife, would like to hear that Ed's wife was a very kind woman, worked with my grandma, but had no idea how creepy her husband was if while they were at the funeral, my granny could take their dog out. She accepted. Ed's wife was supposed to bring the keys, but Ed showed up instead. My grandma was alone. Ed apparently told my grandma how Ed loved to get her naked and tried to kiss her. My grandma slammed the door in his face, locked it, and called my grandpa. Ed stood and paced around our porch for 15 minutes before he finally left. Remember, he did this 30 minutes before his grandbaby's funeral. My grandpa showed up, went on his property, and told him if he ever saw him come close to me or my grandmother ever again, he would end his life. I've since moved out, but my grandparents say they don't get much trouble from Ed. He has a home nurse now, due to Parkinson's, and threw a fit when he found out he had a male nurse because he wanted a female nurse instead. EDS known in my old neighborhood for creeping on women. Luckily, all our neighbors knew how weird he was, and were always on the lookout. Moral of the story, make sure you don't have an Ed next door. TDLR had creepy neighbor named Ed, who was a peeping Tom, and always made the moves on my grandmother. Story 27, I don't live next to these neighbors anymore, but my next door neighbors had a habit of threatening each other with guns whenever they argued. It wasn't uncommon for their kids to come to our house for safety and to borrow a phone. One or the other was regularly arrested because of this. It was very, very rare that a month passed, and this didn't happen at least once. It was weird to say the least. Story 28, my former neighbor kept displays of stuffed animals on the porch and front lawn of their house. When I first saw it there, I thought maybe they were moving, but I lived there 4 years and only watched that weird collection grow. Story 29, my husband and I live in a small cul-de-sac. One of our neighbors had a couch chair and a couple of boxes out on the curb the day before trash day. We noticed it, but just assumed whoever it was had made arrangements to have the trash service pick it up. No big deal. Until later that day, when my husband got an email from the HOA president that another one of our neighbors whom we've never even met was greatly upset by this. Assumed it was us that left the stuff out on the curb, and was ready to call the cops because she was afraid otherwise SHE would be responsible for getting rid of it. Still not sure why she thought it was us, of all people in the cul-de-sac. We pretty well keep to ourselves and don't have junk laying around outside the house or anything like that. And sure enough, the stuff was hauled away by the trash service the next morning. Story 30 grew up with neighbors downstairs who would complain about every little noise like walking across the floor, running a bath, flushing the toilet, laughing. They used to bang up all the time, and it was a rented flat, so they used to make official complaints as well. Couldn't listen to music, not even quietly, had to use headphones. Couldn't even play the board game Frustration, the one with the dice and a bubble, because they would bang up. So yeah, weird people. Story 31M, convinced my neighbor is a meth crack addict. Strange people come to his door at all hours of the day. The cops have visited a handful of times this past year, even knocking on my door a couple times to ask if I know where he is. Story 32, a guy who lives in the building next to me is always naked. That's totally fine, but he always has his windows open, and he lives on the first floor. It's getting to the point where whenever I go out to get the mail or just leave my apartment, he's just blaring and standing in plain sight going to town. Now my girlfriend is anxious about bringing her friends over because Fappy Stan could be doing his thing at any moment of the day. Story 33, me, my boyfriend and his housemate's his best mate, and the partner live in a half block. So this lovely lady, let's call her Jan, lives in the front house. We live behind her house, and there's a fenced-off driveway for us to get to our house. We own 2 dogs, and one is a very young, lively Vizsla. She has an obsession with him. I constantly catch Jan peering over the fence to check on him, as she thinks we don't treat him right. He is our baby who we dedicate our lives to. LOL. I will regularly find new toys, meaty bones, tennis, etc. on our property that is definitely not from us. She constantly questions us on our dog's diet, if he gets fed enough, if he's cold outside, if he's getting enough treats, and she even gifted him her dead dog's jumper. Now our dog uses this against Jan, and we recently got a call saying our dog escaped. but she reassured us that it's okay, and she will look after him for the day. I don't know what she did, but I've never seen my dog bolt so fast out of her room. All in all, lovely lady, although weirdly obsessed with my dog. Story 34. I leave for work at around 6 a.m. Most days my neighbor is in his truck with it running, drinking a beer, smoking a cigarette, and reading the newspaper. I had to ask, he's a single dad with 2 teenage kids. He likes to get up early and read the paper, but doesn't want to disturb the kids. It's a 1,600 square feet house with a master bedroom and 2 living rooms, and he can't find a place quite enough to read the paper, and try not to judge the 6 a.m. beer either. Story 35. Not so weird or creepy, but I have a neighbor who is, by all appearances, very nice. One day he tells me we should get together, and I agree, thinking that it'll be nice to have a friendship with someone lives next door to me. So we get together, and it's a multi-level marketing pitch. 9 years later, we're really little more than acquaintances. Edit spelling. Story 36. When we moved, our neighbor was about 80 to 85. I spoke to him a couple times the whole time I lived there, about a decade. He's lived there pretty much his whole life. He hoarded things. His house was filled with clutter, and no one in the area had really got a good look inside. The most I've seen of it is the pictures he gave us of our cat, who liked to hang out in his house. When she passed away, he had a camera obsession for a bit. He was showing a new camera off to his other neighbor, and showed her some pictures he took from his bedroom window of her garden when she was in it. He didn't mean anything weird by it, I don't think. He didn't seem to talk to many people, didn't have a lot of family. He went into a home a few years back, haven't heard anything since, and I've moved away now. Story 37. When I was younger, my family and I lived next to a family of Orthodox Jews. I'm pretty sure they hated and judged us hardcore because the family that lived in our house before us had also been Jewish. And then we roll in like the Griswolds with our 30,000 Christmas lights and North Pole lawn ornaments. Their little girl would stare at us from her bedroom window, unsmiling, unblinking, staring. She had these piercing green National Geographic eyes, and you got the sense she would have tried to see straight to your soul if she thought you had one. They had a pack of tiny Pomeranians that barked day and night, and every so often one would get out and would have to carry the barely dog back to its owners, who were never grateful. It was an odd couple of years. Story 38. I'm definitely the weird neighbor. I swim with my dog almost every day. I stay up really late and go on lots of midnight or later night walks. I'm also antisocial and try to avoid them as much as possible. Story 39. Anytime someone goes out the front or back door, he'll mysteriously have to put things in the bins or trim some plants, then go back inside when no one is out. Same thing when car headlights come in or leave the driveway. If anyone is out in the garden, he'll be exactly parallel in his garden, not talking, but just there presumably listening. He'll leave his car parked really close to the edge of his driveway that joins onto us, so we can't park cars far up the driveway without fear of hitting his car at the doors. If he manages to get his hands on a package, we can't sign for he'll read off any signage to try to decipher what's in there and question us on it when we ask for it back. This last one is less creepy, but more just awful human. One time during heavy winds, we had a tree snap, but hang suspended right at the bottom of our driveway near the road, and he parked down there right underneath where it would fall, having never parked down there before. No clue whether this was just to cause commotion or to claim insurance, but had not long bought the car from new, so who knows. Story 40. Backwall neighbor is a tweaker. His backyard looks like a well-groomed junkyard, 8 storage sheds, all in various stages of decomposition, full of power tools and strange various items stolen from around the neighborhood and traded to him for tweak. He was a decent stonemason, so he's constantly doing power tools, shop vacs. Angle grinders are going 247,365 for the amount of noise and dust I've endured over the last 10 years. You'd think had built the Taj Mahal or Coral Castle. There's also a petting zoo-type enclosure with a pot-bellied pig. There's usually yelling, screaming going on in the early afternoons. Sometimes a few of the storage sheds are occupied by his homeless friends. A shanty town like District 9. Sad thing is he's a nice guy and generally a good neighbor, just living in a different world culture. Story 41. Not our neighbors, but us. We have a cat named Ketchup. He likes to go outside, and sometimes he's gone for days at a time. We don't know where he goes, but we call for him every night that he's gone, and he eventually comes back. Anyway, our neighbors asked why we yell for condiments in the evening sometimes. We explained that Ketchup is our cat. Story 42. Not one family per se, but there's a nearby house that seems to have new people move in and out with no notice or signs of a move. There was a single mom with 2 kids who was replaced by a different single mom with 2 kids at one point. It took me a few weeks to realize they were different people. I thought she had just bought a new car instead. Then one day they were gone, and now it is just some single guy living there. There's stuff on the porch and in the driveway that stayed consistent through each of these changes. Oh, and during the blood moon a few years ago, One of the single moms that lived there had some friends over, and they all did a ritual in the front yard when the moon turned red. Story 43, growing up, we had some really crazy neighbors that lived across the road from us. The parents were real nutters and abusive to their kids. They would regularly lock their children out the front of their house and lock the front gate, so they couldn't leave with nothing but one glass of water. Now, this is outback Australia where temperatures would regularly reach 40 to 45 degrees. The kids would be screaming and crying out the front. Police would get called, they'd come. Kids would go back inside, then get put back out once they'd left. The mother would also come out the front of the house when my mom would be farewelling or greeting people and start yelling MRS Kahlo 89, "Why won't you be my friend? I know you think I am crazy. Please be my friend." A few years ago, I heard the mother had been committed to a psychiatric hospital, husband remarried, and kids have nothing to do with them now. Edited typos. Story 44, I have a bipolar neighbor who is always getting in huge fights with her boyfriend that I can overhear. Not that weird, but a week or so ago, I got out of my car to her standing in the driveway bawling, crying, and she asked me through the tears if I had any rice. Story 45, I had a neighbor that would stand in his bushes and stare at me playing when I was 14. I tried to ask him what he's doing, and he said landscaping and ran away. The same neighbor would stare at our chickens across the fence for hours. Story 46 walks backwards up the street at 10 p.m., stumbles around the street, sometimes later than that. The first I started noticing it, I saw him walking around all deranged like in the center of the street. When he saw my car approaching, he sort of stumbled off to the side and just stood there staring as I approached the stop sign. I rolled my window down and asked if he needed help. He didn't respond. I then asked if he needed emergency services, and he approached my car and leaned over inside it with his full upper body inside the car and started asking me questions. Who are you? Where do you live? What are you doing? I can't explain it, but I immediately got a vibe like I was suddenly about to be murdered, so I just said, "You want to drive off now?" And dude just kept staring. Leaning into my car, I started driving with him hanging out my window, and he looked taken back and just very oddly said, "Okay." I immediately called the police on him. Still see him wandering the streets at night. Sometimes he stands outside a house down the street and just stares at it for a while stumbling. Story 47, there's a lot of weird neighbors because it's a small town and everyone's hopped on meth. One time my next-door neighbor approached my mom and asked her, "What would you do if I killed your sister and cut off her head?" My mother backed away slowly. Story 48, the one time I talked to her, she let me know that her ex was a piece of because he raised a hand to me once. She was extremely unpleasant and angry at life. Her 4 to 5-year-old kid was still in diapers and had bruises and welts on his arms and legs from where she'd beat him. I saw her hit the boy with a fiberglass rod. People use them to outline their driveway for snowplow drivers. The cop I talked to was very uninterested and played off the abuse like it was discipline. There's a difference between discipline and beating a 4-year-old because you hate your life. My other neighbor who had lived there longer would get a couple beers in him and say he wanted to kill her for things had seen her do to that boy. Edit, this took place over 15 years ago, so the kid is out of danger now. I was in college and moved off campus, amongst the townies. It is easy to say, call CPS, but for me to go to the police station took everything I had. I still feel the nervousness from sitting in the PD parking lot wanting to throw up. The way the cop shot me down ended any motivation. I had to get further involved. Short of murder, alleging a woman is an abusive mother is probably the most serious allegation you can make towards a woman mother. If there was even a one chance I was wrong, that I didn't see what I saw, I tried to do the right thing and was figuratively punched in the gut and basically told to mind my own business by the authorities, the protectors. Story 49, I have a neighbor who sometimes jams out on his tuba. He always does it in the middle of the day, and he's actually pretty good. As a fat person, I feel like he's playing me my own personal theme music, and I really love him for that.